Senator Rogers.
Here.
Senator Bartow.
Here.
Senator Mays.
Here.
Senator Pugh.
Here.
Senator Kenna.
Here.
Senator Palmer.
Also here.
Senator Herrera. Here. Senator Polk. Senator Conover.
Here.
Senator Grant. Senator Adeli. Senator Borowski.
Here.
Senator Lamb.
Here.
Senator Litzenberg.
Here.
Senator Wolf.
Here.
Senator Sheehan.
Here by proxy.
Senator Hall.
Here.
Senator Majeski.
Here.
Senator Horn.
Here.
Senator Zengi. Senator Payano.
Yeah.
All right. Is there any discussion on the agenda? Seeing none, the agenda will be adopted. Is there any discussion on the minutes from the 10th meeting? Seeing none, they will be adopted. We'll now move to a period of public comment. Does any member of the public wish to speak? Seeing none, we will move to the reports from officers. President.
So coming up next week, we have the Budget Advisory Committee, which is basically a joint committee between SG, AUCC, and Student Media Board, and we oversee the implementation of the student activities fee. And so that includes things like recommendations for stipend increases or decreases, which student activities then approves. And then we also oversee the overall distribution of the funds for the entire organization as a whole. And so the three representatives from SG are myself, Shannon, and Senator Lixine as the chair of the Finance Committee. So we'll be meeting next Friday, I believe it is. Was it Friday? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we'll be meeting next Friday for that. If you have any ideas of how the budget should go, let me know. SG may or may not be losing money next year. AUCC needs more funds, is the general gist that I'm getting. This year, they basically had a hard time funding student organizations. So we're trying to find out where in the budget we can give them more money to then support student organizations on campus. One last thing that I'm working on before my term ends is the Student Involvement Fund, which is going to be part of the proposal to the Budget Advisory Committee. This is something I've been working on for about a month or so now. I discussed this with Senator Payano at length quite recently. And basically the purpose of the fund is to support people who are involved in student organizations that aren't SG, AUCC, and Student Media Board, because the heads of those organizations all get paid. Well, let's say you're the president of like the Black Student Alliance, you don't get paid for that, and you're investing a lot of time and energy. And I personally believe that if we have more students who are able to be involved in student organizations, that then increases their investment in the community as a whole. So I have a proposal written up for that. If you're interested in reading it over, I can send it to you. Just let me know. That's something I'm going to propose to back the Budget Advisory Committee next week. I'm also working with Director Mascaro of the Student Advocacy Center on room search cards. So we're working with Housing and Dining on this. We'll be meeting with Lisa Freeman soon to discuss that. This has been like a year-long project. A lot of things have sort of come up to push it to the back burner, but we're making sure this is something we get done. I'm also going to be working on an end-of-the-year report to sort of focus on different highlights throughout the year and different things we've worked on. And last week, the week before spring break, we sent out a Google form for the discretionary fund that Senate approved last year. We need more people to submit recommendations for that. I think Chris sent out another email for that. If not, we can send out another one, but please submit more names. We're trying to get that done as soon as possible. And then Shannon and I are going to present on the budget, so I'll let her lead that discussion. But before we do, are there any questions on anything I've talked about? Comments, concerns? Yeah.
So my understanding is that our ability to fund individuals, be them club council leaders or student government leaders, is that we're capped at 1% of whatever the student activity fee brings in because of the rules governing nonprofits. Have you talked to student activities about that in the context of the proposal for club council leaders?
Yes, I have. I met with Dominic a few weeks ago about this. He said it was a great idea and something we should definitely look into. The main thing I'm figuring out right now is how to impact students' financial aid. So I'm working with the Office of Financial Aid to figure that out. They haven't gotten back to me yet, but he said it's something we can definitely do. Yeah.
Is there any precedent from peer organizations for paying leaders of other clubs and things like that?
From peer organizations?
From peer institutions, that sounds it.
Gotcha. Yeah, actually at the University of Maryland, they just passed their own version of this. I want to say it was like last month. But they have like their own big fundraising thing that they do there, where they have all of their fundraising done on like this separate website. And so they got alumni and students to all pay for it to support that. But their student government just passed it. I think it was in February. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Did you have a question?
I can ask you.
Oh, okay. Any other questions, comments?
Maybe something.
Yes.
Sorry.
No, you're fine.
Mr. Speaker,
Senator Wolf?
this unanimously sent until the consideration of suspension, Senator Lindsay to be granted speaking rights.
Without objection?
Thanks. I was just wondering, what are the what's the precedent for determining what student organizations would qualify, like the leaders would qualify for that versus not, since there's so many different.
Yeah, so the way I set up my proposal is that we're going to have these overseeing this committee that's going to be looking at applications for the funds, and they're going to consist of people from student media, AUCC, and student government. And I left it up to the committee to decide how much they're going to award to people and based on what. There are some basic requirements like a minimum 3.0 GPA, having been a student at AU for at least one academic year, 2 semesters. You have to interview with the committee, and it's open to both Pell eligible and non-Pell eligible students. But besides like those basic requirements, I'm really leaving it up to the committee to decide, because I think context matters. And so there's a lot I can probably put in here to help determine that, but I want them to determine it on a case-by-case basis.
That's awesome.
Can I make a comment?
Can you phrase it in the following question?
Would the president be open to?
Would you not agree that
Would you not agree that there is a high there's a high demand for this kind of funds within the minority groups, because something that like has been brought up in a lot of the meetings is that some of these students do not have they want to be involved on campus, however, sometimes they have to work or do an internship in order to like, you know, and then they can't accept a position as president or something because they prefer getting something paid for.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think this is sort of part of the diversity and inclusion conversation that's often overlooked. And when we talk about diversity and inclusion on an institutional level, it's always how many more students of color can we get into the institution? And there really isn't enough conversation about how we can support those students. And so I think this is one of those institutional ways we can support students and make sure that we are providing for them, excuse me, no matter what organization they're involved in. There are a lot of students who are upset that student government executives get paid, and that's understandable to an extent. Make sure that we're supporting all student organizations on campus, and I think this is a great way to do so. And given that we have money in the Budget Advisory Committee that's literally just sitting there that we can use, I think this is a great thing it can go to. Yes.
My question is with regard to how these people will actually.
time for questioning has elapsed?
Mr. Speaker,
Yes, Senator Wolf.
to extend the period of questioning for such time as it may be.
Without objection.
It's a quick question. So will there be like a blanket payment for every student leader, or would it be based on level of commitment? Like what system would be in place to determine how each person is compensated?
Yeah, so I initially had like a tiered system in the proposal outlined, so like 5 payments of $100 that can be allocated for like $250, et cetera, et cetera. But when I met with Dominic, he was saying that the bracket's a little harder and a little more stringent than I think it should be. So again, I'm gonna leave it up to the committee to decide how much funds to allocate based on the context of the person who's applying. I really want all students to be supported in this, but the reality is, you know, funds can only go so far. So it's gonna be up to the committee to decide how much. The amount overall that I'm looking to propose is $6,000, or about like $5,500. So I'll propose that to the committee and see what they say. But I think I'm gonna leave it up to the committee and make sure they have complete discretion in deciding that. Yes.
Who would be responsible for the administration of this funds program? Would it be part of the student government budget technically, and so the responsibility of the comptroller vis-a-vis the finance committee? Would it be run by student activity staff? What are we talking about?
So it's going to be something that student activities is mainly overseeing and administrating. We're going to have students on the committee to help make the decisions, but in terms of like processing the payments and stuff like that, student activities is the one that's going to handle that, because they're the ones who directly coordinate with accounts payable in the comptroller's office, like the university comptroller. So they're going to be coordinating that administration, if that's what you're asking. Yes.
Yeah, that was one part of my question, and the other part of my question, I suppose, is who decides who gets paid? And as a sort of second part of that
Yeah.
question, is there any thought towards, I mean, you touched on it briefly, but thought towards targeting not only the outreach, but the money towards particular types of student organizations, identity-based student organizations? Or is this something that we are, planning to invite some of those organizations along with the chess club?
So I think this is going to be something that's going to be open to all student organizations. I think personally there should be a priority given to organizations that represent historically marginalized groups. But again, I probably won't be a member of this committee, so I can't say who they should and should not look at. And what was the first part of your question again?
Is it this, so this would be a new committee that's being created?
Right, so this will basically be like a subsidiary of the Budget Advisory Committee. This is going to be something that they're going to have to decide early on, and it's going to be like an ongoing thing. I can send out the proposal to anyone who needs it. There's like a lot of details. Yes.
Yeah, I just have a question. I think it's really great to focus on groups from marginalized communities for this, but are you planning on taking into account, or not you, but the
Right.
socioeconomic level, just because I think there are a lot of us members outside of that community who
Yes.
can't, who need a full-time job as well, and then not everyone in that community is from a poor socioeconomic background either. So I think that it's really important to support any person looking for a leadership position who is socioeconomically in need.
I agree, and that's why in the requirements it says that it's going to be open to both Pell eligible and non-Pell eligible students. I think, of course, Pell eligible students should get a priority to some extent, but again, there are students who are not Pell eligible who fall on that weird in between where on paper looks like they have a lot of money, but in reality they don't. And so that's why I wanted to make sure it was open to both Pell eligible and non-Pell eligible students to make sure we're capturing people who sort of fall through the cracks of the system.
Awesome.
Yeah. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Cool. Okay, so Shannon's gonna talk about the budget, and I'll be up here to help you answer questions as well.
Cool. So hello everybody. Excited to see you all. So I'm just gonna talk pretty candidly about how the process was, what happened, and how we were able to get to the budget that we have now. Plus with the tuition increase, how it ended up to be that number exactly. So I've taken you guys through, I'm pretty sure, a couple times, kind of how it works, but just to kind of reiterate, we have the budget committee that I sit on, and then it goes to President Kerwin, and then it goes to the Board of Trustees. And so the Board of Trustees is the final sayer, and throughout that process, anyone can change anything that they want to, but the work that goes, UBC goes through, usually doesn't change that much because it's so much work. Another part that's important to remember is we're an advisory committee. So the two committee chairs do a lot of the nitty gritty stuff, and then we just talk about it once I'm in the meetings. And that's where the student voice kind of section of the committee is heard, or I'm able to discuss and stuff. So this budget cycle, I would say I was dealt an interesting hand, and by interesting, I mean unfortunate. It was very stressful. The committee was pretty nervous for a number of reasons, just about AU's finances. And this is kind of not thinking about how yes, AU does need to restructure how money is spent, but let's take that out of the account right now and just kind of talk about the view of the rest of the committee, because they don't feel that way. So they're pretty stressed. I believe we were in the red in one of the accounts. And along with that, with the campus, not the campus climate, the political climate, they were just very concerned about international students because they make up a lot of the money that goes into the university. Most international students don't come on financial aid, they're full ride, and we're a pretty international school. So a lot of the students that they thought that were going to turn over, they were afraid wouldn't be able to. So that was a big deciding factor in how things were going. So basically we were pretty pretty far behind for a really long time, just because of all of like these changes and like how nervous the committee like as a whole was. So there are like a couple of people, like a whole bunch of different like submitted requests that includes like the VPs. That's like Dr. Hansen, who's VP of Campus Life. And so they went through all of those. And eventually we came out. We have to come up with a range. We didn't have that range until very, very late on in the process, much later than it usually ever is. We usually have it in like October, and we came up with it towards like the very, very, very end. That's not a me thing because I can't do those calculations. I'm just like there to like talk. But it took a really long time. The range that we came up with was noted in the memo that we sent to President Kerwin with the budget that we came up with. We did not send him a balanced budget. He had to do some maneuvering, some maneuvering himself to complete it. But it was decently balanced in a way that it was even better than last year, which was exciting because they were really nervous that it wouldn't be, or 2 years ago. And so the range that was given, I will say that there were a lot higher numbers that were thrown around that room, much higher, more than double what it has been before from the last cycle. That's just because all the constituencies in that room, besides the students, want the tuition to increase. That includes professors, because professors want money and they want tenure and they want. So it ended up, so what was noted in the memo to President Kerwin, it was the range. So President Kerwin went with the lowest possible number in the range that was sent. Which I was pretty excited about, as excited as I possibly could be, because it is a pretty rough situation.
And it was mainly what the students wanted, the lowest number on the range, and so we made sure to make that clear with any of them, and that like, again, the professors wanted a tuition increase because we need to pay professors more, which is understandable, and we also need competitive salaries to attract better professors to the university. But students, a lot of students can't afford a tuition increase that was proposed by some of them in the room. So we stuck with the lowest possible one, which we got, which was pretty exciting.
Yeah. And so that's what happened. Then it went to, President Kerwin came out with that. He finished the balanced budget, picked that number, and then the Board of Trustees voted. And that was the number that was chosen. And this isn't to slam any of the constituencies that were in that room, because like, we all just come from different places and it's very difficult. Like there are some really wonderful professors that were there that like just want to be able to sustain living in DC, you know? So a difficult cycle, but I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has more. Oh, and I will also note, Dr. Hansen yesterday, Campus Life received everything that they asked for, which is really exciting, and that's what matters to students. So
stuff that we advocated for that Dr. Hansen prioritized, like more an increase in funding for the counseling center, Title IX resources, all of that stuff was approved by the board. So it's the best of a really bad situation in that like we couldn't get a tuition freeze, which is what many students wanted, but we got a lot in terms of funding for more services out of the budget. So tuition did go up, but we also got more funding for services that are really critical to the community.
Yeah.
What are the university's largest expenses, and then what are its fastest growing expenses?
Fastest growing, I would say right now,
I'm not sure what its fastest
I
growing.
don't know what the fastest growing is. I think the largest expenses are salaries, yeah.
Like overwhelmingly, most of the budget goes towards salaries.
Fastest growing, we are spending a lot of money right now on internet programs though.
Yeah.
That's a really big thing right now, online classes. That's one of the biggest things that like we talked about during the budget cycle, which is kind of interesting. It's a big revenue maker, but also it costs a lot to maintain.
Yeah. What do you see as the future of the movement for a freeze in tuition in a world where the university is already struggling to make ends meet and is, and we're hearing 4% as the low end? Yeah,
I mean, I think that it's difficult to balance because I don't think people, a lot of the time, the advocacy for that tuition freeze is symbolic in itself. So it's asking for that restructuring of the university to be able to reach that. I don't think that I think that it is taken very, very literally by a lot of board members, and that's where that disconnect is. And I don't think it's explained well enough to those board members, besides the one person in the room that like, that's not what students want. Like, they want a restructured university, if that makes sense.
So
It's taken as literally
Yes.
by most
Yeah.
students as well.
It is taken very
Yeah.
literally by a lot of students, but the way we always explain is that like, even if we can't get a tuition increase, I think what the demand for a tuition increase represents is that students don't feel like they're getting the biggest bang for their buck. And so if we're gonna keep investing more money into this university, we need to make sure that's reflected in the services we're getting. Which I think in this budget process, I made it clear to the board that they need to make sure they're putting their money where their mouth is, and I think they are doing that with this budget. A lot of things like the counseling center, health center and stuff like that are space issues as well. And so like while we need more money for those resources, we also need bigger spaces for them. But again, the demand for a tuition increase really reflects that students aren't completely satisfied with the services we have here. And I think the university is responding to that. Yeah.
So on the one hand, I heard you mention previously that the reason behind the tuition increase was to increase professors' salaries. But now you're saying that the tuition was raised to improve student services. So if you could walk us through what exactly this money is being spent on, I think that would make.
Yeah,
So I think, I think the problem is that you're viewing the two as mutually exclusive when they're not. I think in this budget, we're accomplishing and balancing many objectives and goals. One of them being raising professor salaries, one of them being increasing the funding for the counseling center. And so all of those priorities were made very clear during the budget process, but it's not like we're doing one in spite of the other. Like you can accomplish both goals. Right. And that is largely in part what the vice presidents had to submit to President Kerwin in their budget requests. So Dr. Hampton submitted stuff like the counseling center, Provost Scott Bass submitted things that dealt with professors and faculty. And so those are objectives we had to balance from two very important constituencies on campus.
Just to add on to that too, they're publishing like a report. There is a budget report that's published. I just don't have like the exact numbers because I'm not the person that goes through like line by line everything that's spent at the university. So they're doing it. They're compiling a whole booklet, and that'll be available to students. I don't know when the exact date is, but it'll be very public and on the website. Also, when I was like during training, just kind of like add some context too. Like it's a matter of like when I trained for the role or whatever, they explained it to me like it's like here, it's like having balances, you know? Right. So it's like when you add lower, you have to, and then eventually you have to just get it to be equilibrium.
Do you know how much of this money is going to be given to like this financial aid office or the merit?
Yes.
Yeah, so for financial aid, it was an increase of, let me see what the exact number was, 3.7 million. And so the way the budget process works is that whenever tuition increases, there's always a proportional increase in financial aid. So it's technically always leveled. But the thing is, you can lose financial aid if your financial situation changes.
Right.
But in theory, the financial aid you had previously should be about the same moving forward.
Adjusted to.
Exactly, to account for the increase in tuition, yeah. But as for merit aid, you technically can only get merit aid when you first apply to AU. There's no process for getting merit aid after your application. Which is something we talked to the office about, and it's like a whole.
They're also trying to be very much more financial aid based than merit.
Yeah,
right.
So
I know that.
In the past, I think it was like 5 years ago or something, we were 80% merit aid and 20% need-based aid, and now it's flipped where we're 80% need-based and 20% merit. Yeah.
With regard to increase in professor pay, was it mentioned at all any sort of agenda to reduce adjunctification, so hiring on adjuncts as full-time associate professors instead of just driving to the top?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't like directly a conversation that was had, like we never talked about adjuncts in particular, but I think that was like taken into account with like the faculty voice. Also, there were no adjuncts that sat on the committee.
Yeah.
It was all professors. Yeah.
And I think when talking about adjuncts, it's really important to recognize that a lot of the faculty that students come here for are adjuncts who are currently working in DC for a certain amount of time because they're working for Senator Obama, whoever, or a different president, or whoever they're working for. And so that's a large sell for a lot of students at the school. And I don't necessarily know that a lot of adjuncts want to become full-time faculty members. They're sort of like, I'm here doing this really cool thing. I want to share my expertise. But in terms of having people rise up the ranks, we do have a sort of like pipeline program where we try to keep PhD students involved in terms of academics here. So that way when they finish their PhD, they then become professors at AU. And they also teach while they're getting their PhD here. So there is a pipeline program in that sense to help people move up the professorial ranks, I guess.
Yeah, I'd just like to add that outside of SIS and SPA, most adjuncts don't want to be adjuncts, so just.
Yeah, and it's really interesting that there were no adjuncts on the committee.
Good to know.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Just, I know you mentioned a couple points back, like student, or not just student space, but like the need for not just like funds for like the counseling center, but more space. Is there, I know like there's like a whole thing we're going through with like MGC and like figuring out where like space is gonna be allocated there. Is there like a timeline you have for that or any sort of like guesstimate as like
Yeah,
when that's
so
gonna be a thing?
we've been in talks with student activities literally the entire year trying to figure out what that is going to look like. And the third floor is very interesting in that the space up there that they have to relocate over time, and it wasn't something they could just like scrap completely in one fell swoop and then put student organizations up there. But my understanding is that there is currently space available that they're going to start trying to use. And then there's also the bridge, which is going to be opening up next semester, which is now on the 3rd floor. But it's literally like the bridge between MGC and Bender, where like if you're walking through the tunnel, the thing that's just like Abbey Joel Butler Pavilion. There's like a little cafe that's going to be opening up there. And I believe it's going to be like 24-hour service, student run. And so that's something that's coming next semester, I believe. But the whole 3rd floor thing is like, it's a very slow process because they have to relocate everything. That's available now that I believe they're going to try to start using for student organizations. Yeah.
This is a question not so much budget related as general.
Yeah.
Advocacy, but since we have them here. The university, specifically the Austin Campus Life, recently announced that Heather Pratt, who's been our outstanding Title IX program officer for over a year, is going to be departing, but may have already at her last day. And so the search has begun for a new professional to fill that role. Will students be involved in that search process?
Yeah, so right now the interim Title IX officer is Dean of Students Rob Pratsky. So he's going to be taking over until we find someone new. Students, the way these searches work is that like students are involved to the extent like you push to be involved, except for like on the presidential search committee level where they sort of came to us and they were like, we need you to be involved. And so they hired a search firm and everything. I think it's really important that SG works with Dr. Ah to make that clear that students need to be involved. Beyond just student government, I think student organizations also need to be involved. Groups like Students Against Sexual Violence have been instrumental in a lot of the work that Campus Life does. But right now, Heather Pratt just transitioned out, so we're going to be working with Dr. Ah to see what role we can play in helping with that transition.
And can you commit to advocating for student involvement?
Absolutely.
Will the president yield to a comment?
Yes.
So I sit on SOG, the Sexual Assault Working Group at the university, and all of the candidates for Title IX will go before SOG. General undergraduate student representatives, representatives from the graduate students, from the law students, SASB has a representative, student government has a representative, SAC has their own representative. So there are a number of people involved. They don't actually make the hiring decision, but they'll get to ask questions like they did when they hired Ms. Pratt.
Yes.
When talking about the budget, was there any discussion, since there was a huge talk about how international students are gonna affect the campus, was there any like initiative into hiring or opening positions on campus that would deal with, undocumented or, other groups that are being affected as well?
Yeah, so we've talked about this at length, the need for that kind of position. And my general understanding, especially right now, given that the university is in the transitional phase, is that they're not necessarily looking to expand the president's cabinet, so to speak, which is really, makes a lot of things very difficult for us in terms of that. But that they never really talked about wanting a position like that. It's something that we talked about needing to be a priority, but it wasn't something the university prioritized itself. And again, on the whole international students thing, they are an important constituency to the AU community, because let's say we have something else like another executive order that happens where we can't even have international students come to AU. I don't even want to talk about them in terms of numbers because that's really disgusting to me. But like again, international students pay full price for AU. And so if we lose that source of revenue, then another tuition increase would be probably a lot bigger than the one we just saw.
We do have some money that's in reserve
Yeah.
if that ever happened and was the case, so that the university could stay functioning and we wouldn't go bankrupt and you couldn't go to school
Yeah.
here. So that's kind of
It's like a
a
university.
little helpful, but it's still very
Still
stressful.
worrisome.
Yeah.
How can GW and other universities freeze their tuition so that when you're a freshman, you come in
Yeah.
and the price you see is the price
Yeah.
you pay? How come we're not?
So-
able to do
Yeah.
I'll preface this and I'll let Shannon take it away because she dealt with this a lot. That was one of the proposals we initially went into the budget process with. It's called the locked tuition, where when you come to AAU, you get a certain price that you're going to pay and you pay that same price all 4 years. Of course, it's a little different for each year. But my understanding is that it's an administrative nightmare. Dr. Hansen worked at GW when they implemented that, and it was not something that was like, that went over very well. And I believe GW's like financial state right now too is not.
Yeah, so
Not the
they've been
best.
using GW as a model for that,
Yeah.
and they currently are like it's like really
They're
bad
like
over
a lot
there.
of debt.
They're in a lot of debt. Parts of the reasons they didn't like that, like it's an administrative nightmare, so also like, not every student is a 4-year student. Some students take breaks, some students decide to take semesters off. So like that was part of one of the issues. Along with that, it also is a matter of like, this is gonna sound bad, but like this is how like, you have to think about it in terms of, it also like technically looks bad because when you do that, the tuition that it starts with, like that it shoots up. So, and then that tuition continuously goes up. So you would look like the most expensive university. The schools that do that are listed as the most expensive universities in the nation. So like we would be like number 3.
Because you have to like offset for the cost that you're
Yeah.
not charging students with a locked tuition for the next year.
Is also, just to add, not to mention that, that forced GW to go need aware in their admissions, whereas we have need blind admissions.
Well, not completely.
All right, well, but in strictly speaking, in the up or down admissions decision.
Yeah.
In fact, GW had to go fully need aware and then lied about it for a while.
That
was
sounds
true.
really bad.
That's really true. It was really bad.
And then that was a big scandal.
And like Dr. Hansen was there for all of it, so like it was kind of, you can't really be like, we want this.
Cameron's like, it's a great idea. She's like, no, I was there when it happened. It's not.
So-
And in terms of the whole like need aware thing, we're need aware to the extent that like we prioritize getting more low income students into the institution, so that way it's not only an institution for rich students, basically. And there was this Middle States report, which is like an administrative thing that they work with this organization that basically holds them accountable over a series of years, where the organization told them that like you can keep admitting low income students if you want, but you need to make sure you're changing the institution to support them. And so that's something that the university also has on the back. It's like an accreditation service too, so. Yes.
Given the high, I'm sorry, thank you. Given the high prices of the institution already and the 4% tuition increase, how's the school going to market itself better, given its expensive reputation and DC location, to keep attracting low-income students and students that wouldn't be able to pay the sticker prices?
So a lot of the funding, part of the funding in like one particular chunk that was kind of difficult to explain to students, just because it doesn't seem that important, but like it actually is kind of
It's like
important.
not an attractive.
Is the capital campaign. So like we're doing a massive advertisement campaign that like will market AU, and that has to do with like having our new president. It's called like the capital campaign. So like it kind of like comes. There's not a lot of, I don't know a lot of the nitty gritty stuff that's happening, but there is a chunk of money that was like on the list of budget priorities that we had.
And so the whole thing about like tuition and our sources of revenue is that they need to be diversified. So in board meetings, we talk about this at length with the vice president of alumni affairs and development, where a lot of our source of income right now as an institution is tuition. So whenever we need to do anything, we have to raise tuition to account for that. President-designate Burwell is going to come in and do a whole like capital campaign and raise more funds for these kinds of things, because we realistically can't keep relying on only tuition or like 90% tuition to fund our university. Like it's not sustainable, in my opinion. It's not something students are gonna want down the line. So again, not a really attractive topic, but in terms of like long-term affordability of the university, probably one of the most important in my opinion. And President-designate has worked with Walmart Foundation, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation on fundraising and things like that. So she'll be phenomenal. I'm excited about seeing where that takes us.
Any further questions?
Yeah.
My question is, was there ever a talk about, you know how we have like merit-based scholarships?
Mhm.
Was there ever a talk about like increasing financial aid and some of that money going for need-based, like a full need-based scholarship or the student?
It's like a full ride.
Yeah, for like need-based, because there's full rides for like,
Yeah.
if you're super smart, you're high school, but like, there's not a full ride for like, you're really poor, but we
Yeah.
still want you.
So when we talk about like full rides, it's typically in the context of like the university literally just giving you money directly from them to afford the university. But what the university does is they try to compile an entire package that accounts for things like an AU grant, federal loans, and other things like that try to avoid sort of private loans to help you fully afford the university in that sense. But I don't think it's possible for them to completely do it in that like AU can give you like a full ride as a need-based student. Like they're just directly giving you a grant to cover like all $60,000+. Actually, that's a lie. I'm sure it's possible. I don't think it's likely. That's the thing. Yeah, because they try to compile a package where they can spread out the money across a bunch of need-based packages.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any further questions? Seeing none, we'll move to judicial board chair.
Oh, can I just add something really fast before I go? Just like comptroller stuff. So really fast, for the numbers that are up on the website, they're gonna be, so like Devontae talked about, like we're gonna receive less funding this year because AUCC needs so much more. And so SU General has like a decent amount of money in it right now, but that's like getting cleaned out very soon because like so many clubs, I like saved a lot of it so that like once AUCC ran out of money, then we're able to fund those like trips and stuff like that. So there are a couple co-sponsorship things along the way. I can send an email out of all the things that we're planning on doing. But like we're sending like AU girls volleyball to like the competition and stuff. And we're also doing the Right to Party thing with the Wellness Center and ZBT, which is exciting. So those are all in the works and I can keep you all updated on. There's just some nitty gritty stuff we're working through.
Question.
Yeah.
So if we can perform the same function as club council, what's the point of sacrificing the money to give it to them?
We don't perform the same function. So club council, we do mainly like travel subsidies.
Yeah.
I think what Shannon was getting at, club council funds other extraneous things that clubs do. Like we only perform like the travel subsidy function.
Yeah, or a co-sponsored
Yeah.
event, but then we get like things out of that.
Okay.
All right. Cool. Thank you very much.
And if you want a copy of the proposal outline, let me know.
I have 4 cases, so Jonah, can you waive the time now?
Actually, it was my secret.
So moved, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I don't know if you're gonna still. All right, whatever. All right, so I'm gonna dispense with the non-mandatory reporting stuff first, then I'll go into talk about all the cases that the board has been hearing. Just in general, happy election season, everybody. It is my obligation to report that Associate Member Labaria has resigned from the Judicial Board. So that leaves one opening on the board. It is a presidential appointment, and as a reminder, one of my other members on the board is currently in Beijing, so has not currently done anything for cases this semester. We're down to 3. Don't force anybody else. All right, I have 4 cases to talk about that are election related. One of which was found not in violation, so I'm going to just read the case summary for that one. For the others, I will read the opinion. So, in the case of Schwartz for president versus Lichtenstein for president, elections inquiry 11-9, the petitioner was Andy Schwartz, a candidate for AUSG president. The respondent was Haley Lichtenstein, also a candidate for AUSG president. The charge was violating elections policy book, Article 3, Section 1, subsection 3, early campaigning. The outcome was not in violation, and it was approved on the 8th of March. As a separate issue, all of these are available online, so if you wanted to see that, feel free to do so. The second case, elections inquiry 11.010, Schwartz for president versus Dumpson for president. You're going to think it sounds very similar. Petitioner was Andy Schwartz, candidate for AUSG president. Respondent, Taylor Dumpson, candidate for AUSG president. The charge was the same, violating elections policy book, Article 3, Section 1, subsection 3, early campaigning. Outcome, found in violation via conference with the prosecutor. The sanction was a suspension of campaign from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. on 9th March 2017, approved on 8th March 2017. The of this case was that Ms. Dunston's campaign started 30 minutes early, and it went to a conference with the prosecutor. The third case, Elections Inquiry 11.011, Benjamin Koshman versus Dunston for president. The petitioner was Benjamin Koshman, a member of the class of 2020. The respondent was Taylor Dunston, a candidate for president. The charges were twofold. Charge 1, violating Elections Policy Book, Article 4, Section 4, false endorsement, and 2, abuse of power as an AU employee. Outcome on charge 1, found in violation by formal hearing. 2, dismissed. Sanctions. I'm not going to read the list because I'm just going to read the opinion. The American legal tradition has long held ignorata juris non excusat. Ignorance of the law excuses not. The board concurs and extends this principle to include ignorance of technology. In defense of their actions, the Dunston campaign claimed that in sharing a promotional video through the AU Explore DC Facebook page, Ms. Dunston was attempting to post to it as herself. Although there is a reasonable chance that this is true, it acknowledges that Ms. Dunston personally shared the video from the page using privileges granted to her as a result of being a former AU employee. Accordingly, the board finds Ms. Dunston in violation of Article 4, Section 4 of the Elections Policy Book. On the second charge, the board feels that although it is an accurate representation of the events that transpired, it is not technically a violation of the rules. The second charge is thus dismissed. In administering the sanctions, the board must weigh the severity of the charge and the severity of the crime. The charge, false endorsements, is one of the most severe rules in the Elections Policy Book. However, the crime, by virtue of limited exposure, was relatively small in damage. Weighing the two, the board orders the video to be taken off the Explore DC Facebook page, which was done, by the way, and the campaign finance allowance be restricted by 25%. Should Ms. Dunston qualify for the leadership grant, it may only access $150 of the total $200. We further request the campaign issue a letter of public apology to be posted on the AUSG website. We feel that the removal and the apology correct the violation and the restriction makes up for it. Final case, case 4, Elections Inquiry 11.012, Christine Matravec for comptroller versus Elizabeth Pancotti for comptroller. What I found fun about this case was it was the only non-presidential one. The petitioner was Christine Matravec, a candidate for ASU comptroller. The respondent was Elizabeth Pancotti, a candidate for ASU comptroller. The charge was violating Elections Policy Book, Article 3, Section 2, Subsection 1, failure to attend the nomination convention. The outcome was that it was withdrawn by 11th hour motion of the petitioner. This was approved on 23 March 2017. Any questions? Yes.
I just want to congratulate him because there's very few people who are able to rhyme in Latin, so.
It's not mine, unfortunately.
Is there any further questions or discussion?
There are open cases, so I'll be back next week.
Wait, so I'm a little bit confused. So can you explain slower, your
Yes.
the second case against, because I understood,
False campaign, like
Yes.
early start.
yes, so
Yes.
what happened with that? I'm a little confused.
So for both of the early campaigning cases,
Yeah.
The timestamps on the Facebook pages show that content was created prior to the designated start of elections, which was the end of the first information session, so it was 10 p.m. on that Monday.
Mhm.
End of the final one. Yeah, anyway. So with one of the cases, it was clear in the formal hearing or in the conference that what had happened is the candidate had like created content but had a private Facebook page such that at 10 o'clock they made the page public. So it looked like it had violated, but like there was evidence to suggest that it was originally private and then made public. So that was fine. The second case was unable to demonstrate anything of the sort, and so was penalized for the half hour of early campaigning. Make sense? Any other questions? Cool.
Thank you. All right, we will now move to the suspension of Senator Lickstein. Let me just explain what's going on before she comes down. So per the bill everybody in this body passed earlier this semester. Whenever there's a senator that goes over the allowed absences, they're just automatically suspended and you have to vote them back in. So what happens here is she will come up just like a regular nominee for a seat, and she'll have 4 minutes to talk, 4 minutes for questioning, the debate. And when you vote, I'll make this very clear when we vote, but you'll vote to reverse her suspension because she's petitioning right now. Okay, does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions? Okay, so you want to come down?
Thank you. Hey guys, happy Sunday. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Haley. So I got suspended because of my absences. I've only ever missed one Senate meeting, but unfortunately have forgotten to sign the book when I do my office hours. A lot of you see me in the office every week. I'm there like way more than 1 hour a week, and that's my bad for forgetting to sign the book. I went over my absences because I had a family emergency 2 weeks ago and wasn't here and didn't have time to buy a proxy. But otherwise, I've never missed a meeting. I'm very dedicated to the Senate, and I hope that like my character and the work that I've done outshines my forgetting to sign the office hour login book, and that I'm able to remain a part of the Senate. But I'd be happy to take any questions about me forgetting to do that.
Any questions? All right, seeing
Thank
none,
you.
we will move into a period of debate.
I believe you're ready.
Yeah. Is there any discussion?
I would just like to say, just as like someone who's like been working with Haley like all through this year, just all the like legislation she's been putting through and all the work she's put into the Senate for not 1 but like 2 years, I think that for someone who just does all this work for this body, forgetting to sign the book is something it's not malintentioned, it's not something that she's trying to like do to disrupt any of our work. I think she just made a mistake, and so I think that I think it just kind of causes a lot more harm than good for her to just not be part of this body when she's been such an active part of this body for so long.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like the reason why we passed that was to keep people who like didn't care about this body from like staying in this body, but Haley clearly cares a lot about Senate, has done a lot of good work, so.
Senator Herrera.
So I agree with all that, but if she wins the election, we have to hold another one of these on Friday, suspend her consent.
No.
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 What's your question?
Yeah, can you phrase your question in a different? If anybody is a senator that becomes an executive, that transition period doesn't start until May 1st or something around then. So she would still be a senator if you would vote to keep her.
But then you just resign, you don't get suspended.
And I'll say at this point, we'll have at least one of these next Sunday. So it's just that time of the year when all the absences starts coming up. Is there any further discussion? None, we will move to vote without objection. Okay, so here, pay attention. Those in favor of reversing the suspension of Senator Lickstein, say yay.
Yay.
Those opposed say nay. The yeas have it. She is a senator again.
Second time.
Yay. Welcome back.
You can vote and talk. Okay, we will now move to the consideration of Bill 16-17-009. The clerk will report the legislation by number and title.
Bill 16-17-009, a bill creating a position of dean of the Senate.
I sent you all an email, actually 2 emails, with the changes from CRP. Would the sponsor of the bill, Senator Mays, like to speak? You can say no. Okay. We will proceed with a period of debate without objection. Is there any discussion? Senator Mays?
Can I just look this over and can John just explain, or Senator Wolf explain what a summary of what the seniority section
if she'll give way. Yes, during the meeting in the last couple hours of the Committee on Rules and Privileges, I moved an amendment, which you see now listed as subsection 2 on seniority. A few weeks ago, we heard from the chair of the Judicial Board that in response to what I believe was an advisory opinion for which he was asked, that the Senate does not have, as it stands currently, clear rules defining seniority in the undergraduate Senate. That advisory opinion was with respect to who would preside in fact, in my absence as well as in the speaker's absence. However, so he encouraged us to create those rules. And I had been intending to do that when this bill came up, and this bill, which relies on seniority as a precedent, or rather as a determining factor, particular role, it requires that in that case, seniority be clearly established. And so this amendment, which was adopted by the Committee on Rules and Privileges, so now part of the underlying bill, outlines the process by which we determine seniority in the Senate. It's pretty intuitive. It starts with continuous service in the undergraduate Senate, and at the moment that is where it stops because there's only one person who's served longer than anyone else. But then it outlines a series of tiebreakers in the event that those situations would come up.
I have a question, so who would be next in line after Senator Livingston?
I would probably point that question back at you. But as we look at this, so length of previous service in the so I don't know if there are other senators who have previously served in the undergraduate Senate. So that would still result in a tie. Then there's length of service on the Committee on Rules and Privileges or a select committee of the Senate.
Yeah, am I allowed to?
Yeah, if you can figure it out.
Oh, I was gonna say, I think it becomes like very nitpicky at that point, just because almost everyone here was installed, or whatever you wanna call it, in the same week, whether that be like the order, because you do sophomores before freshmen, that doesn't really give anyone, like, I know that technically it gives seniority, but the purpose of this bill, and this is where I find this to struggle, is to provide mentorship or leadership, not leadership, but like mentorship to incoming senators, that once you have to get to that process, there is no point in this bill. Because in my mind, like, if we're getting to the nitpickiness of like who was actually installed on the same day first to be seniority, then you don't have the seniority in which, like, when Senator Mays came to me and talked to me about this bill, it was essentially like, as a freshman and a senator who just came, she didn't really understand, like, and I've been there, like, everyone's been there, what you can do and how to write a bill and like how to whatever, is having someone to help you with that. And that if you were installed like 5 minutes before me because your class comes before my class, you don't have that. And so like once you move on past the length of service section of this, that the bill becomes defeated. You know, because like if we have to go into the specifics of that, then that person can't provide the purpose.
Well, I would add that this subsection as inserted, provides, is useful beyond what would ultimately be Section 8 of our bylaws, in that it would also provide the precedent for presiding over the Senate.
Yeah.
In seniority in that way.
But wouldn't that be a step?
It would apply.
Yeah,
it would
yeah.
apply across the bylaws. So this was simply an opportunity to add what already needed to be added to the bylaws as it is.
I just think like, and
so yes, what you're saying is valid, but it is not changed by the insertion of subsection 2 because were that situation to arise, it doesn't change the fact that there wouldn't be a natural mentor in place.
Okay, we're gonna go
Yeah,
Shapiro?
So I have a couple of questions, thoughts, recommendations that I ask not to encourage them, but maybe to encourage thinking about them. For example, what's a select committee? I'm aware of ad hoc, standing, and special.
Oh, special, I meant special.
So that might be something that we should encourage. To the question that was asked about like who would take over after Haley, one possible answer to that question, or one way to solve that question, is to talk instead about length of service, which is the duration of time, it's a number of terms. So if you serve like half of a year, then that's half of a term. But for the purposes of the third qualification, so length of service on the Committee of Rules and Privileges, if you serve jointly on like finance and CRP, you could theoretically have a whole term halfway through the year.
but, sorry.
I don't know if that solves Haley's concern about,
Yeah.
but what if these people aren't like qualified anyway? But at some point, we just don't have more qualified people. I mean, this Senate is the result of like a very high turnover rate.
Yeah.
Which just like is a fact.
Okay, I'm gonna keep going the way I saw that. Do you wanna say something?
Well, I just wanted to say that like the purpose of the bill, and when I know that some of us are here concurrently, we got here concurrently, but I'm pretty sure that there's some people that have friends that like have given them like I just feel like it's more of a peer-to-peer help. And you know, like there's people that have more knowledge than other people. And I just think that that would be helpful for the incoming Senate rather than this Senate. It would be more helpful for whoever's coming after us, because I'm pretty sure like there is an intent from this group to possibly run next semester for the next Senate, and whoever is new can like sort of get, and that way we get more productive faster rather than like, you know, what am I doing? What am I voting for? You know what I mean? Like I just feel like that will make us one, more effective, and two, more like efficient, if we had that sort of peer-to-peer.
Senator Mays, I saw you next. Okay, Jesse.
I'm obviously like very new to this body, and like that's why I like do support the Dean of the Senate, because like I feel like I need a lot of help. But I'm just curious in the seniority part, like what is the relevance of the executive board, like within the seniority as it applies to Senate? And that might just be because I'm new.
So I modeled this or this subsection based on really the only analog I could find, which is the way in which the United States Senate determines seniority in its body. And so it is meant to, particularly as we're looking at providing either leadership or mentorship of the Senate, because this could be used in either context. It is meant to pay deference to the expertise that comes with service in that role.
Okay, I saw Senator Barto, did you want to say something?
No.
Okay.
The other thing I might add, which is a separate section of the bylaws entirely, but the orientation session, like currently there's a training session between the speaker, clerk, and parliamentarian. Presuming that you're going to create this role, you might want to add this person to that session as well.
I'm sorry, I didn't follow.
You called on someone, so.
I'll take it back.
Okay. Mr. Shapiro.
Okay, at the before the second meeting of the undergraduate senate, of any undergraduate senate, there's an info session that happens between the parliamentarian, the clerk, and the speaker. It might behoove the senate to add the dean to that presentation.
Senator Mays.
I was gonna say, I kind of understand the length of service on executive board because I feel like they haven't experienced, like, for example, I know like Josh has never served in the Senate, right? But if he was, like if he ran next year, like, and we would have another person senior, like, it would make, like, Josh would know how to, like, help people through the process, like, that's just like an example, like, I don't run for it if you don't want to, but like.
Senator Winston.
Yeah, so, I moved for an unmoderated caucus, that we could make an amendment that like pleases people, instead of just talking in circles.
Okay, Motion to suspend the rules,
Suspend the rules and have an moderated caucus for 5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Did everybody hear what that was? Do you want to repeat it? Okay. All those in favor of the motion say yay.
Yeah.
All those opposed say nay. Yeas have it, okay.
Okay, so you did like create stuff, so
Yeah.
do you have, yeah.
I think we should just, I don't know if it's possible, like, because I agree with Haley that it doesn't quite make sense to have like, I mean, if you get to the point where it's like first of the year, like they're obviously not like, it doesn't make sense for them to be the Senate. So I think if there's a way to put the full length of seniority in a different section of the bylaws, so it doesn't necessarily create this and create a separate like set of qualifications to be in Senate and keep most of this, but get rid of like the ranking. No, what I'm saying is that we move like all of these, like obviously this list makes sense if like for like who would resign, but it doesn't make sense after length of service within a Senate, so you keep everything up until constituent representing the following order and move back somewhere else and keep the length of people's services for specifically qualifications to be in the Senate. If that makes sense.
I think that makes sense.
But then if you get to that place,
To get to that place, there's no point of this bill.
okay, but that doesn't mean that the office then doesn't exist.
I know, but
Here's the question. Isn't someone who is qualified to lead the Senate qualified to teach people to lead the Senate?
that's the.
So like,
So and that's
no,
why
I mean like the
I
next
think
in line.
having this, because it's a multi-purpose insertion, I think having it in there. This is the other thing, frankly, like the likelihood that we would get so low on this list is almost nil.
In the Senate.
That's not true. That's not, no, it wouldn't.
That's true. We debated a hypothetical
Well,
of getting
yeah,
this, what it did.
Okay.
It wouldn't, and here's why, because in this, unlike in the order of presiding officers, I
It's
would
two
come
people
in
removed.
in service and presence.
If you're graduating and like, that makes no sense because it's new Senate, I'm sorry, but like hypothetically, that's two people removed in here.
There's still some service.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, you have previous
Also-
Senate service?
Sam Rogers.
Yeah, no, so
is that?
me, because ours are continuous service.
Wow. Where does it say
Both of them
continue?
have previous, in the
Above
first,
my
above
previous. Emma Hankins is probably the second.
So maybe edit that because,
Oh, go Emma Hankins.
yeah, no, I'm not doing that.
Yeah. So in fact, we would get almost no vacancies
Okay.
as it is.
So do we still agree that like exec positions in there?
I think that-
I feel good about that, like, about, adding like things like time to serve, and there's no, like,
How do we come back?
You can
Can I speak on that quickly? I think for the exec position,
You did.
I warn against like modeling anything off of the United States government for this, but I think that like for that part specifically, like even if we don't serve in the Senate, we still deal with the Senate in some form, and so there's always legislation passed that affects what we do, and so I think that sort of like knowledge of the process, whether it's, continuous knowledge, like you're actively involved in passing legislation, or like you're just being consulted when they are passing legislation, I think that's helpful, but I don't know if like.
Particularly if mentorship is.
Yeah.
I mean, personally for me, I'll tell you that what is helpful is if you read the Code of Parliamentary Procedure that Jonah and I read. So that's
Which advises the drawing of lots to determine seniority.
We can all agree that this is better.
Yeah, no, I think having a system is better than throwing dice.
I do have one amendment, once we come back, I do have an amendment to make.
Does anybody want to come back?
Yeah.
Actually, no, two.
Can you stop this? We can either wait 56 seconds or somebody can.
I'm gonna second the moderating caucus.
No,
Without
I'm curious how much of this is redundant though, like are we just bureaucratizing?
we
literally
have nothing for this.
Okay, but then also it's like, someone brought up earlier that maybe this is a speaker job, like,
Or the advisor.
I don't understand earlier for the excuse of person like that was like never in the Senate, like he was elected speaker. I think therefore, like how would he know the seniority of the Senate? So I think it's good that we have a classification of it. It's not more, it's not more like bureaucratizing, like I know this is internal, but this would definitely help like new senators. We're just like Senator Majeski talks. We can't just say the seniority of the entire undergraduate Senate just to one person.
Right, you do this so you don't have to think about it later.
And the other point about establishing seniority is so we know who would preside in the case that, you know, the speaker and speaker pro tem are available.
I have two other points, just real quick. You should include in there that the speaker should maintain people's like seniority and like track that, because at the moment it's a judgment call.
Mr. Shapiro.
Thanks. At the moment, it's sort of a judgment call, so if it was tracked, it would be probably a good thing. Also, I noticed, as best I can tell, that length of service on the judicial board was not considered as part of seniority. And like, theoretically, it's possible that one of my members leaves to run for Senate, or is like simultaneously appointed to Senate. I highly discourage that, by the way. But like, maybe that's a good idea. Like, I think we know something.
Back. I saw Senator Wolf next.
An amendment.
Okay.
First, in subsection 2, line 1, strike length and replace with number of terms.
This is the amendment. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion?
Just to be clear, this eliminates that whole thing with how it's the order in which they're sworn in.
Mr. Shapiro.
Or partial fractions thereof.
Yeah.
Thereof.
Is that a friendly amendment?
Did you say thereof of?
I mean, I would have put or partial fractions thereof of parentheses, but that's just stylistic preference.
I'll accept that as a friend.
Or, so it's gonna, okay, thereof of, Senator Mays.
Oh wait, actually, never mind, it's not.
All right. Any more discussion on this amendment? Seeing none, we'll move to vote. All those in favor of the amendment say yay. All those opposed say nay.
Nay.
Yays have it.
I don't know.
Senator Wolf.
In subsection 2, the litany, the second length of, strike select, replace with special.
This is the amendment. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, we will.
Why do we need to put special?
Select doesn't exist.
Yeah, I was just, this was an error in drafting. He's right.
Senator Higgins.
Why, special and not standard?
Well, yeah, I'd be happy.
Senator Wolf.
If all senators are on standing committees.
Oh, okay, so.
Special committees are elected by the Senate, and so it's sort of a level of trust that the Senate has placed in members.
Is there any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, we will move to voting. All those in favor of the amendment say yay. All those opposed say nay.
Nay.
The yeas have it. The amendment is adopted.
I don't know, I think it's getting close. We're getting division.
Senator Mays.
Okay, I just wanted to, comment that when we were talking about this, like when I originally drafted the bill, I realized that currently the person who like does most of this is Noah, and I wanted to take some of that pressure off him because the speaker job is already very large and like having in the sense there's so many, I just wanted to like, I don't think the responsibility should be purely on the speaker because that's like not technically his role. Like I understand that he is, or he or she would be most qualified, but that's like the plan. And I also want to say that I still like don't think we need to. I think there are better ways to include seniority into the bylaws instead of putting it because it just defeats the purpose of like the original. But like, I know we probably won't get to that point, but like, what if there's a year where there's a big turnover in the Senate, then you would need, like maybe then we should put it into like the hands of the speaker, back into the hands of the speaker. Like if that happens, I just don't think like seniority is like the best place for this. Like the full seniority is the best place.
Is Senator Wolf.
Amendment. In subsection 2, above constituency represented in the following order, insert length of previous service on the judicial board. Insert length of previous service on the judicial board.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay, is there a second to this amendment?
Second.
Is there any discussion? We will move to vote on the amendment. All those in favor, say yay.
Yay.
All those opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Yeas have it, the amendment is adopted. Is there any further discussion on the bill?
Yeah.
Mr. Shapiro.
There's a discussion going on, and if I know anybody who can continuously talk for a really long time in order to allow a discussion to continue, it's probably going to be. So I'm going to hold my minute, and then I hope somebody else will either pick it up from there, or alternatively, you could just file a motion in order to just like wait. Just saying. What are we? Yeah, I think effectively this is the first Senate filibuster, and I don't know what we're at in terms of time.
No, I'm not
Floor.
by all. Can I motion for a 5-minute?
There was a motion for a recess.
Motion to
5
continue
minutes. There is a motion for a 5-minute recess. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor of recessing for 5 minutes, say yay.
Yeah.
All those opposed, say nay.
Hey.
If any of the chimneys have it. Division. All right.
Is there no debate on a motion to recess? Yeah, point of order. Should not a motion to recess be subject to debate?
Correct. All right.
I can't listen to you.
We're gonna go back.
She made the motion.
The person who
so-
left the motion left, so we are now not judged for that.
Point of order.
Yes.
What are we doing?
There was a point of order.
Where are we? What is the business before the assembly?
We are discussing the bill as it appears right now. There's no amendments on it.
Okay, so we're on the underlying bill.
Yes, and there seems to be further discussion pending.
Well,
So,
I have a point.
yes.
Yeah, so we changed, if you could scroll up a little bit, please. We changed where it said before length of service to number of terms or partial fraction. Should that not then apply to length of service in the tiebreaker sections as well? Because I think potentially we could come into a situation, and I'm just trying to take up time here too. I think it's about the point. Where if we get down to length of service, it's not clear what that means. Is it length of service in years, semesters, months, weeks,
All right.
days,
I'll move an
minutes,
amendment to resolve.
seconds,
line by line.
milliseconds? No.
There's a motion, Senator Wolf.
Move to strike each use of the word. Please. Move to strike each use of the word length and replace each usage with the word days.
It's an administrative nightmare.
Use find and replace. Oh, there you go.
Nice. Wow, formatting.
Amazing.
This is the amendment. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Mr. Shapiro.
Not that you don't already exceed the previous parts of this, but is the intention of this amendment to make you the highest seniority again? You have an extra day on everyone else.
Oh, I didn't even think of that. I didn't even consider that. But again, I don't have.
Please.
But days doesn't apply to continuous service. Only continuous service is determined by terms, so no, it would not be that.
All right. Is there any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, we'll move to vote. Without objection. All those in,
We're voting in the amendment.
yes, we're voting on this amendment. All those in favor of the amendment say yay. All those opposed say nay.
Nay.
I'm gonna ask for hands. All those in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. All those opposed, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, the yeas have it. Point of order, yes, Senator.
I am extremely lost.
I would like to make an amendment.
Literally yummy.
I don't know what's happening.
Please, guys, it doesn't help when everybody talks.
Yeah, we're amending the bill, I just don't know what's the difference between days and length, we're measuring by semester, so you got in, it's
Numbers join
confusing.
mid-semester.
Huh?
Numbers join mid-semester.
For example, you didn't join whenever. So this day is what.
Okay, if there's a question, I would be happy to answer. Do you understand or do you already know?
Yeah, I understand.
Okay, I saw Senator Majeski. Never mind.
I'd like to motion to make an amendment.
Okay, there's a motion.
Section 8, Office of the Dean of Senate. I think it is subsection 3, availability. And it says their availability to any senator who. I would like to make an amendment to change who to whomst. Whomst. If that, H-O-M-S-T. Yes.
It's not a word.
Is there a second? Seeing none, the amendment is not adopted.
Come on, guys. It's not a word.
Please.
Point of order.
Guys!
Please. There was a point of order.
Can we move to vote on the whole bill? Is that?
Yes, you may. Senator Hankins.
So moved.
Okay, there's been a motion to end debate. Vote on the bill. There was a second. All those in favor of closing debate, say yay.
Yay.
Those opposed, say
Is there
nay.
a discussion on this? Discussion on closing the floor.
For the point of order, does he have the right to make points?
I said I can't. I clearly said I can't.
No. It was already, the yeas have it. We've closed the debate. Okay, we are now voting on the bill itself. All those in favor of Bill 1617-009, say yay.
Yay.
All those opposed, say nay. Nay. The yeas have it. The bill is adopted.
Mr. Speaker, can you count days? Like, do you know the days of everybody?
Yeah.
Bill passed. Yay. All right. We will move to public comment. Does any member of the public wish to speak at this time? Seeing none, we will move to go to the auditor. Any senator like to speak? Okay, we'll go Senator Rogers.
Yeah, I just want to say, like, it's fine to vote no on things, but it's really helpful if during discussion, you say why you're against the bill instead of just like randomly saying no to say no. So yeah.
In response to this previous.
You do not have the floor. I saw Chris next.
Yeah, so I didn't present today because I really don't have anything to present on. I'm just gonna do two things. One, if you didn't sign up for the Holocaust name reading, which is on Tuesday, 6-7, I believe. That's our SG hour, so check your email, it's that email a few days ago. And also, I moved the governing documents on the website from the judicial board tab to the general government tab. Don't know, I heard a few people complain about that. Not a very pressing thing. Now it's easier to find your one.
Thank you.
Mr. Toriente.
I forgot to mention this in my report, but for the discretionary fund, there were senators who were nominated for it, but I believe in the original bill that was passed, senators aren't eligible to receive money for the work that they do in this body. If that's not true, someone please correct me, but if it is, and you believe that you should get money for whatever reason, you can pass a bill to fix that. Just throwing that out there. If not, then we just can't give somebody who's doing good work any
compensation.
Let me ask the acting parliamentarian to look that up while we do it. Senator Bittner, did you? No. Is there any other senator wishing to speak? Mr. Shapiro?
Wait. Nope, I forgot what I was supposed to
Okay,
say. I'm gonna look this thing.
Senator Bartow.
It's kind of an election season, there's a couple days left, people.
Yeah.
We're almost done.
Okay, I'm gonna get this.
I was thinking about getting a report.
Okay, so as on the agenda, right now I'm announcing our first special meeting, which will be this Friday at 7 in this room. So please be there. If you cannot be there, please send a proxy ASAP, because it is, if we don't have quorum like we didn't at the meeting at 11, 12, 15, that's not gonna be good. So please just send a proxy. And a reminder that there's 4 meetings left in this year, academic year. So if you have not done anything and you want to, please get on that. Right now, we do have something we can do next week, I think. But send stuff so we can actually meet and not have to just call off meetings. Is there anybody else that wants to speak?
Why is this special meeting?
What?
Why is this special meeting?
It's to certify the elections. So kind of like the same thing we did with Senator Lawrence. Do you have a? Okay, I get back to you on that. All right, seeing no further business, this meeting is adjourned.
Yeah.
Hi. Yeah.